John Singleton's Baby Boy is not merely a film, it is a quiet reckoning. Set against the concrete heartbeat of South Central Los Angeles, this intimate character study departs from the gangland epics that often defined the early 1990s black cinema landscape. Instead, Singleton pivots inward, training his lens not on gunfire and turf wars, but on the bruised, beautiful, and often painful interior of a young man's soul. At the film's center is Joseph Jody Summers, played with disarming honesty by Tyrese Gibson. Jody is 20 years old, a father of two, and still living at home with his mother, Juanita. In the film's audacious opening, Singleton visualizes Jody inside a womb, a literal and metaphorical image of arrested development. It's a provocative introduction that signals Singleton's intent. This isn't a movie about the streets, it's about a boy trying to crawl out of childhood. One of the most profound elements of Baby Boy is how it frames Jody's immaturity not as personal failure alone, but as the inherited burden of systemic neglect. In voiceover, Jody invokes the work of Dr. Francis Kreese Welsing, who theorized that the American system of racism infantilizes black men, stunting their emotional and social development. Singleton does not excuse Jody's behavior, but he insists we understand its origins. As one critic puts it, Singleton made a very different film this time, one which focuses on relationships rather than gang violence, and what emerges is a devastating portrait of a young man torn between two conflicting urges, to stay swaddled in comfort or to step into the pain and power of adulthood. Jody, playing with toy cars while cradling his infant son, shows he is both a parent and a child. He mooches off Juanita's cooking, drifts from job to hustle, and repeatedly borrows Yvette's car. "I lie to you because I care about you," he tells Yvette, a line of twisted tenderness that captures the paradox of his emotional logic. As Roger Ebert observed, yes, racism has contributed to your situation, but do you have to give it so much help with your own attitude? The brilliance of Baby Boy lies in its refusal to reduce Jody to a cautionary tale. He is not evil, he is not a villain. He is, as critics note, a man-child, not a bad person, just an irresponsible kid who hasn't squarely faced the adult world. Tyrese Gibson imbues Jody with both charm and contradiction. His soulful eyes mask a quiet shame. His bravado is often a brittle cover for fear. Yvette becomes the emotional counterweight to Jody's volatility. Their relationship, alternately tender and toxic, reveals the emotional violence of stunted growth. Yvette wants more, she demands more. And Jody, unsure of who he is or what he can become, struggles to give it. Their fights are not just scenes of domestic strife, they are battlegrounds of identity. Juanita, too, represents a pillar of tough love. She tells her son to move out, grow up, and be a man, not out of malice but out of necessity. She has lived her own life of struggle and reinvention, now seeking love and partnership in the form of Melvin, played by Ving Rhames, whose presence challenges Jody to confront his own masculinity. The final act of the film marks a turning point, not just for the plot, but for Jody's soul. A violent confrontation with the ex-con Rodney, who threatens Yvette and their son, forces Jody to make a decision. He must choose, continue living as a passive observer of his own life, or take responsibility. In that crucible of danger and fear, we see the first flickers of real manhood. By the time the credits roll, Jody hasn't fully arrived, but he has begun. That, Singleton seems to suggest, is enough. Growth is not clean. It is jagged and painful, full of regressions and small victories. Baby Boy does not offer easy resolutions, it offers a prayer that young black men like Jody might one day break free of the womb, not just physically but spiritually. In Baby Boy, Singleton crafts a story that is universal yet specific, loving yet uncompromising. It is a call to accountability, but also to compassion. As Roger Ebert wrote, the film's power lies in how it takes its characters and their lives seriously, and in doing so, it asks us to do the same. In Baby Boy, Yvette played with raw vulnerability, and simmering strength is more than a love interest. She is the emotional backbone of the story, the mirror in which Jody must eventually see himself, clearly and without excuse. Yvette is Jody's high school sweetheart, the mother of his firstborn, and the one person who has tried over and over again to believe in the man he could become. But unlike Jody, Yvette has been forced to grow up. Life didn't ask her, it demanded it. She works long hours at a clerical job, studies to earn her GED, and shoulders the emotional labor of parenting their son Jojo, largely alone. She wants more not just for herself, but for her child. Stability, safety, partnership. In contrast, Jody's charm has curdled into something exhausting. His lies, his betrayals, his constant borrowing of her car, these are not just annoyances. They are reminders that Yvette is raising two children, one in diapers and one who sleeps beside her. Taraji P. Henson gives a performance that is heartbreaking in its honesty. In what Roger Ebert called the film's most difficult scenes, Henson doesn't perform despair, she embodies it. We see it in her silence, in her trembling voice, in the way she flinches when Jody's anger spills into violence, then folds into weeping. In Yvette's quietest moments, she pleads not for flowers or apologies, but for change. Real change. She wants Jody to be someone their son can look up to, someone who can be trusted, someone who stays. The emotional weight of the film often sits on Yvette's shoulders. She absorbs Jody's chaos and it wears her down, and yet she loves him. She's not naive, she's hopeful. And hope, as Singleton shows, is a dangerous thing when it is not returned. This emotional core is thrown into sharp relief by Jody's relationship with his other girlfriend, Peanut. Peanut is not asking for maturity. She is easy, accessible, and uncomplicated. At Peanut's house, Jody can play pretend and remain mentally young, unbothered by the demands of adulthood. How long can a woman wait for a boy to grow up before she must walk away for good? Through Yvette and even through Peanut, in her own way, Singleton paints a fuller picture of what maturity requires, not just for Jody's personal evolution, but for the lives that depend on him. These women aren't just secondary characters, they are narrative forces, pushing, pleading, daring Jody to rise. Yvette does not want a perfect man. She wants a partner, a father for her son, a home that doesn't shake with uncertainty. In her tears and tenacity, Singleton reveals a deeper truth. For a black man like Jody, growing up is not just about paying bills or moving out. It's about facing the people who love you and realizing their love is not infinite. It is finite. It is fragile. And once lost, it may never come back. At the heart of Baby Boy lies a deeply personal war between love and letting go. Nowhere is that conflict more vivid than in Jody's relationship with his mother, Juanita, and her new partner, Melvin. Their presence in the home forces Jody to confront a truth he has long avoided. The world no longer revolves around him. Juanita is a woman who has endured. She raised Jody alone through hardship, trauma, and sacrifice. For years, she was his shelter, his home, his everything. But now she wants to begin again, not out of selfishness, but necessity. Her romance with Melvin, a reformed ex-con, represents more than companionship. It represents freedom, a second chance, a future. That garden she carefully cultivates throughout the film is more than scenery. It is metaphor. As film critic Travis Bean notes, the garden is the new life she'd like to build, a life that doesn't include Jody. Every blooming flower, every turn of the soil says what Juanita is too gentle to scream, "I've done my job. It's time for you to grow." But Jody doesn't see it that way. In his eyes, Melvin is an intruder, a threat. He wants to believe that his mother still belongs to him, that the world should pause until he's ready to move forward. It's the mindset of a child, not a man, and Singleton makes that tension palpable. Melvin, by contrast, is calm, centered, and unshaken. Ving Rhames delivers a performance of quiet authority, mixing hard-earned wisdom with subtle compassion. When he teaches Jody how to use the remote control for a new television, it's a small moment, but one that speaks volumes. Melvin is showing Jody how to function in the adult world, one step at a time. And when Jody steps too far, threatening, posturing, trying to reclaim dominance, Melvin meets him with force, choking him into submission, not out of cruelty, but clarity. "You want to be the man?" his body says, "then act like one." In that moment, Jody is humbled not just physically, but emotionally. For perhaps the first time, he sees himself not as the center of the home, but as someone lost in it. Singleton doesn't glorify the violence, but he doesn't flinch from it either. The lesson is painful but necessary. Manhood isn't claimed through bluster. It is earned through responsibility. Melvin tells Jody with piercing honesty, "I was like you, young, dumb, and out of control." It is one of the film's most vulnerable confessions. In that sentence, Melvin isn't judging, he's reaching out. He is saying, "I know the road you're on, and it doesn't have to end the way you think." It's a rare moment of intergenerational grace, one man saying to another, "It's not too late." Juanita, too, balances tenderness with truth. She's not afraid to hold a mirror to her son's failures. When Jody complains that Yvette mistreats him, Juanita fires back with a devastating reality check. What would you do if Yvette left you in a hothouse all day with a baby? Her words land like a blow because they're not just about Yvette. They're about Jody's entire failure to step up, to care, to see the people who love him. And yet, even in her frustration, Juanita never stops loving Jody. She corrects him because she cares. She challenges him because she refuses to enable him any longer. Her love is not coddling, it's catalytic. It demands change. Jody's closest companion, Sweet Pea, played with raw vulnerability by Omar Gooding, is more than just comic relief or a sidekick in Baby Boy. He is a reflection of what Jody could become, of what many black men in South Central struggle with, the desire to grow, even when the world has taught you to stall. Sweet Pea is caught in the same cycle as Jody: casual crime, aimlessness, and a lingering boyishness, but he also carries within him a burning desire to change. And that difference, though subtle at first, becomes seismic by the film's end. From their earliest scenes together, we see that Sweet Pea shares Jody's love for nostalgia and neighborhood routine. They ride bikes, hang out aimlessly, and exchange idle banter, but Sweet Pea's arc is lined with yearning. Early in the film, he invites Jody to a baptism. It's not a throwaway gesture, it's a quiet cry for redemption. Being baptized will give me a new beginning, a fresh start, he says, shooing away kids from their bicycles. He wants distance from the person he's been. He wants grace. In that moment, Sweet Pea is turning towards something higher, toward a version of himself that rises above violence and immaturity. And what is Jody doing while Sweet Pea speaks of transformation? Sweet Pea's awkward attempts to change are layered with fear and sincerity. He is like Jody, a product of his environment, too hardened to be naive, but too tender to be beyond hope. Some critics have seen in Sweet Pea the soul of the neighborhood, young men pushed into grown-up roles before they're ready, forced to choose between fast violence or slow death. But unlike Jody, Sweet Pea seems more willing to ask, what now? And though his baptism is never shown on screen, the yearning remains. It's what makes his climactic act so powerful and so tragic. In the end, Sweet Pea is not the loudest character nor the most mature, but he is perhaps the most honest. He wears his flaws without shame, and he chases growth with a kind of childlike sincerity. In a film about delayed manhood, Sweet Pea reminds us that the desire to grow up is, in itself, a kind of grace. And through him, Jody finally learns that becoming a man doesn't always mean fighting. It sometimes means watching, learning, and deciding not to be who you were yesterday. At its core, Baby Boy unfolds like a living case study in modern black manhood, raw, unresolved, and deeply intimate. John Singleton doesn't give us a hero to cheer or a villain to blame. Instead, he surrounds Jody with a self-contained black world. No white saviors, no benevolent social workers, no systemic rescue waiting in the wings. Everyone Jody knows, from the women who love him to the men who challenge or mirror him, belongs to the same fractured community. In this way, Baby Boy functions not just as a coming-of-age story, but as a quiet revolution in storytelling. As one analysis observes, there are really no European or Asian or Latin people anywhere in the film, and there is no significant presence of upper middle class characters. It's just a completely self-contained world. This decision is not an oversight, it's the point. Singleton isolates Jody and his circle to show that the work of healing and transformation must come from within. There is no external force that will save them, only community, accountability, and personal choice. In this space, systemic racism is not denied, but it's also not used as an excuse. Jody cannot hide behind structures. He must face his reflection, take ownership of his immaturity, and grow for the sake of those who depend on him. People need to take responsibility for their own actions and help out their friends and neighbors when they can. That's Singleton's quiet revolution, making a film where the characters save each other, and sometimes fail. John Singleton knew the risks of telling a story like this. In interviews, he criticized the way Hollywood often flattens black characters into product-like images designed to be sold, not understood. They want black people to be who they want them to be, Singleton told a group of film students, as opposed to what they are. Baby Boy was his answer to that, a film that refused polish in favor of truth, a film unafraid of showing its protagonists cry, break down, lash out, and falter, not to shock audiences, but to reflect a familiar struggle. Singleton deliberately uses Tupac's image as a cautionary symbol in Jody's life. The message is quiet but piercing. This path ends in tragedy if no one changes. Jody's pain, his choices, even his defiance, are all entangled with a legacy he both reveres and fears. And by placing Tupac there larger than life, Singleton reminds us of what's always at stake. By the end of Baby Boy, there is no dramatic transformation. Jody doesn't become a superhero, a mogul, or even a radically different man, but he begins to choose to love more deeply, to protect more fully, to stand still and face his life without excuses. And that for Singleton is enough, because sometimes, in a world that teaches you to run or harden, the greatest act of maturity is staying put and doing the work. Singleton takes the symbolism even further, comparing Tupac's eyes to the godlike gaze of the Great Gatsby's Dr. T.J. Eckleburg, a billboard face watching over moral decay. In Baby Boy, Tupac is not a savior or saint, he is a mirror. The tragedy of his death looms large, a life lived loudly but cut short. In keeping Tupac ever present, Singleton is reminding Jody and us of what happens when a boy's heart never learns to become a man's. Singleton is subtle but firm. Even the film's title, Baby Boy, is a soft-spoken judgment. It's affectionate but exasperated, the term that mothers use for their sons long after they've grown. A reminder that Jody's manhood is still honorary, not earned. He is a baby boy not because of his age, but because of his refusal to evolve. Through these recurring symbols, Tupac's watchful portrait, the childish toys, the tiny bicycle, the blooming garden, Singleton crafts a visual language that speaks long after the dialogue stops. These are the signs of a life on pause, a warning wrapped in warmth, a love letter laced with urgency. Grow up, the film whispers, please, grow up before it's too late. By the film's climax, Baby Boy reveals itself not just as a story of individual struggle, but as a deeply personal fable about transformation through pain. Every relationship Jody holds, every bond he tested, neglected, or misunderstood, now reflects his internal reckoning. Yvette, once his loyal but worn-down partner, has finally stepped away, choosing safety and dignity over chaos. For much of the film, she served as Jody's emotional anchor, holding the household together while Jody drifted, but now she's done waiting for a boy to become a man. Her departure isn't punishment, it's survival. Only through her absence does Jody begin to feel the full weight of what he could lose. Melvin, once seen as a threat and rival for his mother's love, slowly emerges as something more complex, a reluctant, flawed, but necessary father figure. When Jody and Melvin finally clash, it isn't just a battle of egos, it's an inheritance dispute between generations of wounded men. But after Rodney's brutal attack and Melvin's tragic death, Jody is at last confronted with an undeniable truth. Life does not wait. Death comes, and love can vanish with it. In those raw, final moments, blood still on his hands, sorrow etched into his expression, Jody returns to the home he never truly left. But this time, something has shifted. For the first time, we see not just a boy hurt by consequence, but a man shaped by it. Then he kneels. He plants flowers in Juanita's garden. It is a breathtaking gesture, silent, humble, and symbolic. The garden that once grew in spite of Jody now grows with him. He no longer fears being left behind by his mother's evolution. He contributes to it. The soil that he once saw as a backdrop for other people's growth becomes his own proving ground. In digging his hands into the dirt, he sows something far more lasting than flowers: commitment, maturity, healing. Baby Boy ends on a note of redemption and hope, one critic wrote, and it's true, but it's not a Hollywood-style resolution. Singleton makes no promises. The final scenes acknowledge how fragile this new manhood is, how easily it could unravel. Still, Jody's eyes carry something new: resolve. He embraces Yvette with tenderness, not entitlement. He kisses his son, Jojo, with understanding, not performance. He reaches for Juanita not as her child, but as her equal. The cycle may not be broken entirely, but a new pattern has begun. And that honesty stirred conversation. In Black communities, reactions were divided. Some praised the film's tough love, its refusal to sugarcoat the struggle. Others bristled at its portrayal of Black masculinity and its messiness. Singleton anticipated that tension. He once predicted, "The Yvettes of the world are gonna love this movie and march their Jodys in to see it." He knew Baby Boy was a challenge, but it was also a gift. Over time, Baby Boy has only grown in stature. For Tyrese Gibson and Taraji P. Henson, the film was a launching pad, introducing them as more than actors, but as cultural voices. For Singleton, it was perhaps his final, deeply personal film, a spiritual successor to Boys in the Hood, this time told from an older, wearier perspective. He was no longer just warning young men, he was calling them in. When Singleton passed away in 2019, many pointed to Baby Boy as his emotional core. It was and remains a story about the sacred and difficult work of growing up, about how communities can wound but also restore, about how manhood isn't inherited, it's chosen, built, and earned. The final image says everything. Jody, kneeling in the garden next to Juanita, no longer threatened by her strength, but strengthened by it. No longer playing with toy bikes or model cars, but planting life with his own hands. Baby Boy is not just a story of one man's evolution, it's a meditation on the question so many families quietly ask: when will our sons become men? And Singleton answers not with certainty, but with possibility, with grief, with love, and with a final image that lingers like a prayer: